Hey, Laila, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Let's see. You are Senior Human Resources Executive. Are you still doing that?
I am. I'm currently the Chief People Officer for AllBirds. Do you know AllBirds?
No. What do you do? What do they do?
AllBirds is a sustainable footwear and apparel company, and it's out here in San Francisco.
Okay, when people say sustainable, what does that exactly mean? Recycled?
Yeah, it's a good question. No, we make our products, our shoes, out of natural fibers and natural materials. So a lot of our shoes are made from wool, from sheep. Our co-founders, one of them is from New Zealand. He says there's more sheep than people in New Zealand. And we make our soles out of sugarcane, and we make our summertime shoes from eucalyptus trees. So all of the products that we make, apparel and footwear, come from material that are natural. And in the end, really are all about reducing the carbon footprint in the world.
Oh, okay. So sustainable means natural, but also non-polluting, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
As
Exactly.
opposed to plastic, which or oils, petroleum. Right. Okay. Okay. I get that. Because I hear that all the time, but I never quite knew what it meant.
I think people use it in a lot of different ways, but now that I've mentioned it, you look at people's feeds. Allbirds is it's taken off like very quickly in the last four
Oh, good.
years.
I'll have to check them out. And you also wrote a book called Strong Like Water. It sounds like something happened. Did you have a big experience in your life that inspired this book?
I did. I had a 5 year period in my life where I experienced a lot of adversity. I lost my husband when my daughter was 3. And then my father had a stroke and passed 15 months later. And then my mother 3 years after that. And as I'm sure you know, Douglas, yeah, when life hits you hard like that, you learn a lot about yourself, and you have an opportunity to self-reflect and to grow. And it was a period of a lot of growth for me, a lot of heartache, and a lot of sadness. But through that, I came out better and stronger, and decided to write a book about it.
Well, I'm sorry for your loss, especially getting hit all at once with three like that. That's very traumatic, I'm sure. How did you start with the book then? What was it that sort of sparked the idea to write it all down?
After my mom's passing, I went with my daughter, who at the time was 8. We moved to the south of France. My company got sold. Peet's Coffee and Tea, who I was working for, got sold, and I decided to take a year off. And my daughter was at the French American school here in San Francisco, so we went to the south of France. And I started to journal because for the first time in my life, I had time to do that. And I started realizing that I really just had learned so much given what had happened to me, and having to learn how to grieve and how to make my way through the different losses. And I just started journaling about them. And as I started talking to friends about some of the insights and the lessons that I had learned, more often than not, they'd say, "Oh yeah, I know what you mean. I can appreciate that. I can resonate with that." And I realized that while the details of my story were personal to me, that the journey that I was on was sort of a universal one, which I think is the one we're all on, right? Like at some point in our life, um, things start going sideways, and how we deal with that moment in our lives really ends up being the difference maker in whether we grow and come out through more emotionally resilient and stronger and actually more grateful for the gifts we have, or we shut down and we become emotionally brittle. And I thought it would be helpful to highlight my journey and my path, if others were in that place in their life.
Sometimes it takes a traumatic experience or experiences, in your case, to kind of give people a push to take a different road, to take a different path in life. And it's funny because you might not have even realized at the time that things, maybe everything felt good. You know, maybe
Yep.
at that point you thought, oh, okay, I've got a good life. I've got a husband,
Yeah.
you know, your parents, everything, your work, all of that. And then when things get taken away, after you spend some time to reflect, you suddenly realize that, you know what, maybe as devastating as the losses were, maybe this was what was needed for you to find something else in your life that you probably wouldn't have found had things remained the
100%.
same. Yeah.
100%. And for me, my big learning, I had always dealt with things in my life by just pushing them away, right? And just sort of muscling through. I had this persona that I was super strong and capable. I could handle anything that came my way. And you know what? It served me well for a really long time. And I probably would have gone on in that way because it didn't appear that anything was wrong. But when my husband passed, and I found myself really unable to really allow myself to feel the depth of emotion, the grief in his passing, I realized that I had sort of been doing that my whole life, really disconnecting from the feelings I didn't want to feel and not going as deeply as I needed to. And that was the first time in my life where it became very evident that there was something wrong. And I may not have even gone into into the valley of despair, as I call it, had I not had my daughter, right? Because it was very clear that in order for me to guide my daughter through grieving the death of her father, I had to do it myself. You can't just show the way; you actually have to live it and be there. And that started me down a path that I'd never been on in my life because emotionally always sort of tuck things away and intellectualize them and minimize them, and you're not looking at it as positively as you can be. And it was very hard for me to shift that about myself because, to be honest, and it sounds so naive, but I didn't see the point in being sad. I just didn't understand it because I'd never really allowed myself. And what I realize now is, if you don't feel the lows, you don't feel the highs either, right? You cut off the peaks and the valleys.
You said your daughter was how old when your husband passed away?
She was 3 years old.
Okay, pretty young, but old
Yeah.
enough to understand sadness and loss and grief, I would think. At least feel it. I don't know,
Yes.
dealing with it,
Yes.
it
No,
may be a
that's
different
right.
issue. But the one thing that I always found interesting, and I had this with with my family, is that the parents want to protect their children from tragedy. But if you don't cry in front of your kids, they don't understand how to deal with it. If they see you cry and then you get better and you both cry together, I think it's easier for them to deal with because I know that I had these issues when my father died. I was a lot older, I was 20. There wasn't really an outlet for my grief because my mother did like you did. She shut her emotions off, and I didn't see a lot of despair in her, and it was difficult for me to deal with it, even at that age, even at a young adult's age. Is that what you mean on your talking point by let go of your hero persona? Is that kind of a
Yeah,
reference like that, where you got to show that you're human, that you have
that's right.
the feelings, and then share those with your daughter, so you both kind
That's
of deal
right.
with it? Yeah.
Absolutely, right? It's great to be the hero and get things done, but if you're the hero, that means you can never show any sign of weakness. You can never show any vulnerability. You can have never have a down day, and that's just not possible, right? And it puts immense pressure on yourself, and it's just not real. And to your point, Douglas, you are not. I wasn't modeling the behavior that I wanted my daughter to demonstrate. And of course, like you, I got it from my parents because when my husband died, neither one of my parents were there for me. And that was also a shocker where I realized, oh, wow, you're not going to comfort me. in the end, I realized they didn't comfort me because they didn't know how, not because they didn't want to. But that was the process and that was the journey and sort of figuring out that whole thing. And then saying to myself, I don't want to be like that. I want to learn how to feel, allow myself to be sad, to break down, and then get rebuilt back up again, and be there to comfort my daughter or anybody else for that matter in their time of need. And that's when I took the other road.
Well, I agree with you. And also, by you doing the hero uh, persona, it also puts, you said it puts pressure on you, but it also puts pressure on your kids that they need to live up to that because they're
And they need to
looking,
be perfect.
right. And
You're
that's
right.
just an impossible achievement for most people, right? Because I always felt like when my father died, I mean, I cried all over the place. And my mother didn't. And I felt like, you know what? Maybe when I feel the need to cry, I'm going to go somewhere else because I didn't want to do it in front of her because she wasn't doing it. But something you said that was very, I think, right on is that it's not that they didn't want to, it's they didn't know how, incapable.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
some people
It
have
took me
had,
a long time.
yeah, I think some people have had tragedy in their life at an early age and it left a permanent scar to where
Yeah.
they just cannot. They built the wall at that point in their life and that wall is as strong now as it was.
Well, and to your point, I mean, if you say, what is the book Strong Like Water about? It is one woman's story of how she recognized she had that wall up and how I was able to tear it down. I mean, that really, in its essence, is what it is about. Exactly.
It's funny you use that particular analogy because Bruce Lee used that analogy where he said, be
Yeah.
like water, where
Yes.
it's pliable, it bends, it flows,
Yes.
but yet it'll cut through rock.
Well, Bruce Lee got it from Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu was a Chinese philosopher.
Okay.
I think he was around 600 BC, and he wrote 81 verses called the Tao Te Ching, which really translates into the way, like the way of life. And these 81 verses talked about the paradoxical nature of life and the inherent duality of life. And one of those verses was called "Be like water." And Bruce Lee took that, right, because it very much was all about, his jujitsu moves and his kung fu moves. But strong like water really is. There are more ways to be strong and powerful than just hard, right? You can be strong in a soft way, in the way that water carves through rock over thousands of years. And so for me, it meant to infuse a little tenderness into your sort of, hard strength, because it can be both. There's two faces to strength. There's vulnerability, strength and vulnerability, and strength more in that sort of command and control, sort of traditional strength that we always think about.
Okay, well, we've got about 1 minute left. Do you have a website that you want to give out that people can check out your book or a personal website?
Yes, absolutely. It's LailaTarraf.com. And I'm also on Instagram at Laila.Tarraf. Um, and you can buy my book on Amazon or any other online retailer or in your bookstores. It should be out now.
Okay, when did it come out?
Last Tuesday, April 13th.
Oh, just out. Okay. So
Just out.
any feedback yet? Any reviews or anything come through?
It's been overwhelmingly positive. Yes. In fact, the next day after it came out, it was number one in personal growth and family and personal success and spirituality. So I've been really, really pleased.
Oh, well, great. Glad to hear it. Well, thank you so much
Yeah.
for coming on the show and sharing.